pushback that I've always heard when comparing homophobia to racism is that I couldn't help that I was born black, but you chose to be gay, you chose to be trans, you chose to be queer, you chose to be whatever. So don't compare something that's your choice and something that is deemed unnatural or an abomination to the fact that I was born black. What would you say to that person?
I would say that folk need to get off the short bus and get on the longer one, because obviously when queer people compare queerphobia, homophobia, etc., to racism, we are all adult and educated enough to know that we're not comparing in literalism, but in principle. Because discrimination is discrimination, and economic oppression as a result of your skin color or as a result of your orientation or of your sex or your gender is the same in principle. We're not saying that queer people have been enslaved and were imported here and were lynched and were buck broken and were sold and auctioned off. We're not saying that the hate physically manifested the same way. We're comparing the principle of hate and prejudice to something that can help conceptualize the issue for Black Americans who struggle with queerness and struggle with why it's important for queer people to fight for their rights, or to march in the streets, or to have a gay pride, or to come out, or to etc. If black if the issue wasn't black for black folk, but was for something else, we'd be comparing it to what it could be compared to for the sake of relatability.
Okay.
But even so, when cis hetero folk do that, and they if y'all need, that's, we know it's not the same, baby. How about you recognize the fact that this is just your excuse and not have to hear us? The fact that you want to nitpick and you want to challenge everything. Do you ever think about where the notion to challenge comes from? Like, this is just their way of not having to hear you by policing the hell out of the analogies, policing the hell out of the metaphors. They know exactly what the fuck queer people are saying. They know exactly what the fuck queer people mean. But because generally cis hetero folk have internalized queerphobia, they have the incentive to not hear and accommodate us, and will find any reason to not hear us. Any reason to not hear us.
Okay. That makes it okay. I see where you're coming from, because when I've talked to, or really just hear people talk, you know, a lot of what people say they don't like about the queer community, to me, it seems to typically come from religion, Christianity in particular. God, I mean, my grandmother, she still says it's about my lesbian aunt. God didn't make you that way. God don't like that. God don't want you living that way. Now, for me, I get straight to the goods.
Yeah.
I asked them, are you saying that gay people are gonna go to hell? And they say, well, yes. I said, okay, well then what's the difference between that gay sex and you having premarital sex? Because it's all sexual sin. So a lot of this shit is like it's because of religion, but then we still pick and choose what parts, and then they talk about Sodom and Gomorrah and then Adam and Eve. But I want you to speak on this because you're a spiritualist. Are there examples of gay and queer folk in African spirituality in ancient Africa? Was that a thing?
Oh yes, it was a thing. I wish I would have brought those notes. So to go there, even the Bible acknowledges same-sex people, not necessarily in the term of homosexuality, but in the term of eunuch. If you study what eunuchs are historically and culturally, they were males who occupied the chambers and the quarters of kings and queens. They oftentimes were responsible for manicuring the lawn, upkeeping the estate. They were entrusted servants. They oftentimes did the hair of the queen, of the concubines, etc. So they occupied this great political position, and these men oftentimes were either castrated men, because obviously you, as a king, you want your lineage to stay clean, and you don't need other men procreating with your women and your wives and your concubines. So castration was oftentimes required to be a eunuch, or if you weren't physically castrated, you had to be mentally castrated, which is where same gender loving men came in at, as being employed as eunuchs, men who had no incentive, no desire to be with women or to participate in hetero paradigm.
So a queen, one of the girls.
Literally one of the girls. That's why a lot of eunuchs, if you look at like the ancient Greece movies and shit, and they depict eunuchs, they always are kind of a effeminate nature, etc. So eunuchs are biblical, etc. And of course, pre-colonialism, Africa, it's interesting how Black people will allow young Pharaoh and allow Dr. Umar and allow Polite to tell them that sexuality is non-Black and that it's European and it's perverse. The question has to be, why the fuck do you think the colonizers had to come over and evangelize Africa into homophobia? Because homosexuality, pansexuality, transgenderism was rampant throughout tribes, African tribes. So when the European man stepped on the soil and saw this diversity, he said, oh, hell no, these people are out of order. These people are chaotic. These people are operating in perverseness, etc. And so they had to evangelize and Christianize Africa as a result of its diversity. So if you study anthropology prior to colonialism, you will find depictions of men on ancient wall paintings, etc., in homoerotic positions. You had African queens who identified as kings and called their harem of men their wives. You have certain spiritual and prophetic groups in pre-Africa who literally, you had to be two-spirited in order to even be initiated, because to be two-spirited in pre-colonial Africa, you were basically considered a superhero and had superpowers because you could gatekeep both of these polarities, this masculine and feminine realms. You had natural, organic access to, which brought your humanity into a fullness. You had certain tribes in Africa that actually revered same gender loving unions and marriages as more spiritual than cis hetero marriages. You literally have certain parts of Africa that literally it was institutionalized for the warrior class of that African community to be able to go to the parents of a young male and buy him as a temporary companion for their conquest, who could act as temporary wives, who they had sex with. And this was literally law and institution.
So this just wasn't happening in Greece. This was happening in...
This is pre-colonized Africa. This is pre-white man Africa.
Dr. Umar would cuss you out for saying that, but okay.
Get that school up, Dr. Umar.
I hear you. Okay.
So can
because the interesting thing is I have friends who are spiritualists. People call them witches, whatever. But in different spirituality, like communities, especially over in Haiti, DR, it's very common for the men to just be fluid.
Yeah.
And the women are cool with it. Like it's just not a big deal. And they're very spiritual people and they're fluid. Not all, but they're initiated in different African spirituality sects, SECTS. And a lot of them are fluid. And a lot of them are very in touch with the spiritual world.
Look, there are even African deities and gods who are literally what we consider to be intersex themselves. Like literal African gods, African deities who are both male and female. I mean, people think that this is a new issue, but the third gender category is literally global. Okay, I even listed some of them here. You have in southern Mexico, the muexes, okay, which are individuals born in male bodies who identify as neither male nor female, who are a part of Mexico's ancient culture. You have the Native American Navajo culture, who recognizes a third gender as two-spirited, which we've discussed here, who are essentially trans persons. You have freaking in the Polynesian culture, you have the Somo, okay, who are males who identify as female, and they are fully accepted in Samoan culture. You have South Asia's Hydras, who not only have an unlimited gender expression, but who also have their own damn language. You have Madagascar's Sakracha, who are boys who exhibit, listen to this, Storm, boys who exhibit traditional feminine behavior or personalities who are then raised by their parents as girls from a young age. These males raised as girls are not even labeled as gay because sexual orientation isn't a factor for the Sakalava, and raising a child in this third gender is natural and accepted in the community's very social fabric.
Wow.
Talk about across the board.
The world. In different places.
Yes. Different places, different times throughout history, cultures and societies have embraced and integrated these other types of people in a loving, in a spiritual, in a socially accepting way. And I think that's what's largely missing from the American conversation around gender, is because we are left brain country and we're rooted in science and logic and reason, and we want to throw all the science at it, which is why we say things like, bitch, you ain't got a uterus, or bitch, you ain't got a dick, or whatever it is. We throw the science at it. What's largely missing from the conversation, which derails it and muddies it, is the spiritual aspect of gender. Because yes, we know that the body is the vehicle, but we do not consider the context and the purpose and the nature of the soul that occupies that apparatus.
Oh, okay. So now, so we're understanding the science, but not the spirituality.
Spirit, yeah.
Oh, and that's even another conversation, because everybody believes different shit.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of it, right? All these identities, Christian identity, Muslim identity, atheistic identity, but yet queer people are not able to have an identity. Everybody else get to be in all of their identities. They black ass identity, they corporate identity, they silver spoon ass identity, I'm a natural bitch, I'm in my Macy Gray bag identity, or I'm a hot girl identity. I mean, everybody else get to have identities, Storm. Everybody else get to live from their identities, exist in their identities, champion their identities. Oh, God forbid queer people also have intersectionality and actually have identity. We're lunatics. Oh, okay.
Damn.
Fine. Okay.
I like the way you put that. And speaking of identity, before we took a pivot, we were talking about black men's identity, black males' identity, and you were saying I'm not your version of manhood and my version of manhood is different. So I had took a pivot, but I'll let you pick back up from that point.
Yes. The black community and its rigid boxes for black men are crazy, but
it's a storm show. Ay, it's a storm show.